our master fader at the bottom, right? So today I want to continue on with that and move on to day 2, which would be considered like the mixing stage. All right, now you've already gone through, you've recorded all the stuff into your session, okay? And we have to figure out, what do we do with it now? Okay, so that's where we are. So main things when it comes to day 2 is start with your rough mix. Okay, and what I'm talking about with your rough mix is basically your balance and your panning. All right, and when it comes to balance, I want you to think of balance, you know, the faders, everything that we have going across the mix screen. All right, those are your dynamic considerations. All right, that's what balance means. All right, and you should never forget that, like I said, the performance and the characteristics of your sounds will absolutely determine your production's dynamic range, okay? Because dynamics can really shape what we want our listeners to feel in the mix, okay? Now, while the loudest sounds in a mix will grab the listener's attention, all right, determining how it's actually how all those sounds should be balanced, all right, with working with one another, is much more elusive and challenging, okay? And I mentioned the other day about a term called friction, all right? And you need to consider your friction, all right? And what this means is that when you have a focal point, all right, and in our case, we're going to lead vocals. That's probably the biggest focal point that we have in any mix, all right? And so we have to determine how all those supporting elements in our mix actually, you know, go against or work with our lead vocal, our focal point, okay? And this term friction, what that really means, it just determines how much the supporting elements of the mix will like threaten or help, you know, draw the listener's attention away from that focal point, all right? That's really what dynamics and balance does, all right? And now with balance, we have panning, all right? And panning left to right, that's what that means, all right? It's a knob right above the VU meter down at the bottom, okay? Now, panning, like I told you the other day, it's a tool, it's a technical tool that we use to distribute sounds within this imaginary stage, the stereo field, all right? And we use it to alleviate masking. And I told you masking is like when multiple instruments fight for the same frequencies, all right? So we're trying to help with that. We're just trying to declutter our mix, all right? And we use this really as a creative device for our purpose, okay? And, you know, panning, the whole range in the spectrum side to side can go from very balanced, all right, to very unhinged. And, you know, the most dramatic stereo effects that we use often involve, you know, taking individual mono tracks and panning them to opposite sides, you know, so that if you put something over here, you want to be able to complement something over here, all right? So that you have this stereo, the sound field that, like I say, complements one another, all right? And we do this, we pan these various instrumental parts, okay, based on, a lot of it is frequency, all right? They share a significant frequency, or it could be rhythmic information, all right? They're playing off of each other rhythmically, all right? But we separate them, we pan them in different directions so that we can actually hear each part a little bit more clearly, all right? That's what we're going for. Now, for example, all right, we might pan a triangle opposite a hi-hat, all right? Maybe something like that. Or if we have multiple distorted rhythm guitars, all right, put one guitar over there, one guitar over there, all right, the type of idea where they complement one another. And by doing this, this tends to introduce a little bit more of a robust rhythm and pitch variations, okay, rather than just having like a single source, all right, like a guitar or a keyboard or something like that. If we can start to complement each other's based on their rhythm and frequency, it's going to give us a much different, much better effect. Okay. And a lot of times when we're recording, right from the very beginning in pre-production, before we ever hit the studio, we will think about how these complementary, like mono parts, rhythm or frequency wise, right? We think about them that we know we're going to pan them opposite each other in the final mix. So it's something you can think about when you're just building up your arrangements. All right. Now, number 2 on the list. All right. So that was the first one, rough mix with balance and panning. All right. Number 2 on the list is gain staging. So let's talk a little bit about gain staging, what that means. When you're doing a rough mix, okay, and this is just early stages, that's why we're calling it a rough, all right? It's not a finished mix. We're just starting to tweak some knobs here. You want to be able to actually anticipate the loudest parts, all right? Like your vocal chorus is going to be a loud part. We know that the snare is going to be loud, all right? Any crashes are going to be loud. We may know that, like, we have a really, really loud electric guitar, all right? So these things, okay? And it's these loud parts, the reason they're so important is because we have to watch them, especially on our master fader, so that we don't clip. So we're watching for these high, loud peaks, okay, on our master fader. And like I told you the other day, when we're mixing at this stage, you want to keep it around -10. That way, and what that does, that gives us about 10 dB of headroom for the next stage. Okay. And if we mix too hot, if we let our peaks get away from us, all right, you may end up with distortion, or the mastering engineer has no room to do anything. All right. And so you would use this. I told you the other day, like when we create groups, this is when you want to use that all without master group, okay? When things are just getting too hot, okay? You want to grab that all without master and just bring everything down, all right? Bring everything down a little bit so that we can watch our gain stage, how everything is adding up to give us that final -10 on our master fader, all right? That's what we're watching for. Now, when you're doing this, remember I said leave that master fader at 0, okay? But you want to watch that to make sure it stays at -10, all right? Everything stays in that desired range, right? And so that's number 2, gain stages. Now, number 3 on the list, all right, when we're doing our rough mixes, we have to put a couple things together, all right? I put 3 things into this category, all right? 1 is clip gain. 2 is volume automation. And then the third one is the trim plugin that I talked about in class the other day. All right. And I'm going to show you each of these here in a second. All right. And so I want to talk about the differences between, those 3: clip gain, volume automation, and the trim plugin. All right. And when to use them. All right. Because we do use all 3 of them in different ways. All right. Now, first, let's start with the clip gain. If you're unfamiliar with clip gain, all right, let me show you. Let me show you here. Let me switch screens here. And let me take you to this window. Okay. So now everybody should be seeing my edit window, right? Now on each of the tracks, and we'll go right here. I'll show you. We'll zoom in a little bit. You will see right here in this corner, all right, the little fader in the bottom left-hand corner, all right? And beside of it, you will see a little number. Right now it says 0 dB. This is your clip gain, all right? And if you grab the fader, you can turn it up or down. And what it will do is it will actually make the waveform louder or quieter on that track, all right? So if I grab it, you will start to see it'll switch over to a little fader. There we go. and now I can raise that up, and you see my waveform getting louder. But you'll notice what happens down here. Now my peaks are clipping. All right, they're pushing up to the edge of the clip, way too loud. So let's bring it back down, and you'll see my dynamic waveform getting smaller. All right, and I can lower it. If it's recorded too hot, I can drop it a little bit. All right, but we're going to leave it, put it back to 0. Hopefully get it as close as I can here. All right, and so there we go. All right, back to 0. Now, if you don't see the fader on your clips, if you don't see this down here, you turn it on up here. All right, remember I told you Pro Tools is very, very logical. Okay, so if we want to see something that we don't see, we go to View. All right, View, Clip, and then work your way down. You will see clip gain. See that? That's where that is. All right. Now you can also do clip gain line. All right. This will give you an actual visual line to be more precise. Do you see it? How it gave me that line in the middle? So I can do that as well. All right. But if you don't like that, which I don't keep that on, all right, it just gets in the way of my actual waveform. Completely up to you. All right. So I'll turn it off and just pay attention to my little fader in the corner. Okay. All right. Now, if you do use the line, the good thing about the line, let me say this. So let's go back here, turn it back on. With this line, okay, you can add automation here. All right. Now, we'll talk about automation later, but this is where you would add it. All right. You switch it over to your pencil here, and now you can start to draw in your automation for your vocal. See that? You can do that there, but we're going to skip that for now. But that's the point of why we would use the line. Okay? No automation yet. Save that for later. Okay? But now, what's the difference between turning down the clip gain, what I just did, versus the channel fader? And the channel faders, if you go back to your actual mix window, all right, you have your VU meter at the bottom. That's what I'm talking about there, okay? Now the clip gain and the channel fader, they both control the volume up and down, all right? They are essentially the same if the track doesn't have any processing on it, no effects. This is the big difference, okay? The key with clip gain, that little fader I just showed you in the corner, all right, it is what we call pre-fader, all right? And what that means is that it happens before any of your plugins, all right? Whereas your volume fader, the VU on the actual track, that is what we call post-fader, all right? That comes in after your plugins. So you're going to actually get a different effect on how it treats your volume, okay? So pre-fader means it's going to turn everything up before it goes into your EQs or your compressors or your reverbs. Just going to turn everything up and send a hotter signal down the chain, all right? Versus the VU meter down at the bottom, then that's going to control it after it's already been EQ'd or compressed or sent to the reverb, all right? So pre versus post. That's the big difference there, okay? So that's why we use one over the other, all right? Now, if your audio is inconsistent, all right, this is when I would go in there, I would select a part that's you know, the contrast that maybe has a lower volume, or the singer backed away from the microphone, something like that. I would go in there, I would cut this out, this specific part, and then I would use clip gain just for that one section, all right? And let me demonstrate that just so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, so if I look here, say for example, this first part, it's softer than the rest of this, right? You can see that, All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this clip and I'm going to hit Command E, and that creates its own clip. And you'll see that now this clip has its own clip gain. So if I want to just do this one section, I'm going to raise it up, see, just a little bit, to where now this is going to match this back section. Oh, excuse me, this back section right there. Okay. And now you would use clip gain like this to level it out, and it's all going to be about the same. It'll help you control the level actually going into your processing chain. All right. Now your audio will hit your effect like a compressor a little bit more consistently all the way down the track. All right. That's when I would really use this clip gain to separate out and even out your any low spots on your track. Okay, that's how this is used. All right, does that make sense? Now, the third way, automation, we're going to skip till later. I don't want you to use automation until you are finished with all of your balancing, all of your effects, everything like that. Don't add automation in too early, all right, or it's going to mess everything up later on. So that's why I'm going to leave it out right now. We're not going to worry about that, all right? But I do want to remind you on your trim plugin that I showed you the other day, all right? That's going to be in your mix window, and it goes right here, okay? In your first insert, plug in. Now, it should be under, right there, under Other. See that? Trim. Or you can go into Search right there and type in Trim. All right, whichever way, okay? And now it's going to give you your trim plugin. It's going to come up. And you remember we talked about we wanted to do this on our reference tracks. I told you that reference tracks are typically 10 dB louder than what you're trying to mix. So we would lower this 10 dB. All right. You can do this the same way as far as any particular tracks that are recorded too soft or too loud. All right. You can take it both ways. All right. This essentially does pretty much the same thing for your entire track, whereas your clip gain you can actually separate out into pieces on your track. That's the big difference between these. All right. Now you would say, why would I use this? Well, you don't necessarily have to use this. Okay. You could theoretically just take this off the track, no insert. All right. And then now your VU meter might be a little bit lower than everything else. And that's perfectly fine as well. These are just options, okay? All right, or you could leave it there and use your trim. Just 15 different ways to do the same thing. All right, just ways around it. All right. Now, next thing I want to talk about is how to create aux tracks. All right. And we create these stereo. You want stereo based on your effect. All right. Whenever we're dealing with things like reverb, compression, delay, we always want stereo aux tracks. Okay. We can have mono or stereo. We want stereo. Stereo will give us a chance to have left and right and spread things out. That's what we want. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to create a stereo aux track for things like reverb, compression, delay. It's the same process no matter what you put on it, okay? And when we're doing this, you want to treat your groups as one, all right? So what I have here, I talked to you yesterday about routing folders, okay? So if I have all of my vocals, you'll see all of these vocals right here are in this one routing folder, okay? And I'm actually going to change all of these outputs, all right here. I'm going to take them and I'm going to put them in this bus, this vocal bus. All right, so I'm going to put all of these vocals right here into, and I want this one as well. Hang on. There we go. And you don't have to worry about this right now, but what I'm doing is I'm sending all of these tracks into that routing folder, that vocal routing folder right there. Okay, that's what I'm doing. And what I'm now going to do is down here at the end, okay, I am going to add in a stereo send. You know the shortcut, Shift Command N, right there. All right, it'll bring up, oh, hang on. There we go. It'll bring up that window, all right? And what I want is a stereo aux input. Do you see that? That's what I want. Now, just like everything else, I told you don't name everything right here. We don't want like audio 1, audio 2. We don't want aux 1, aux 2. It's the same idea. So I am going to create a reverb. See that? And now at the end of my meters, all right, at the end of my mix track here, I get a reverb send. And you can tell it's a send based on this little symbol right here, okay? You can see that audio has like an actual waveform on it. See it? Okay. Routing folders have a little folder icon, all right? And sends have a little arrow showing you that it's going somewhere, all right? So that's track type will show you that it's a send, all right? Now, what I will next do, and you may need to go back a couple times on this one, but if I go into my IO, okay, I will get this screen. And you will see that it has a bus tab. See that? I can go in here now and actually name my buses. I'm going to call that reverb. All right. Now, what that means is that I will go in here and I will choose. I'm going to send this one. Where is it? Right here. On this send, on this bus, you should now see. Hang on. I think I have to put something on it first. Let's put a multi-channel reverb. I like fab filter. Where's my fab filter? Right there. So I am going to go, you don't have to worry about all these different fab filters. It's based on like Atmos and situation like that. I'm just going to go with a stereo. All right, and there's my stereo. Let's put a nice, put a medium-sized vocal. A plate always works well. We'll go with the plate, okay? Just example, don't worry about that, all right? But now we should be able to have a vocal. There we go. See how now it's showing up? So now my vocals, I'm going to put send here on my bus. There are my vocals. So on my send here, and everything's coming up on my other screen. All right. There. This is my send level. All right. So now on my vocal routing folder, okay, in my sends, you see that right there, I will create a pathway from everything here to come out of here, okay, to go into here. All right. That makes sense? And now on this send, my reverb send, I now have a reverb right here. And mix, whenever you have a send, you always want 100% in your mix. All right. So now if I solo this out, and this is solo safe, that's why it's grayed out, should be able to hear this. So now let's actually see what we have. Fingers crossed, it should work. Oh, I see what's going on. These are all vocal comps. Oh, that's not good. Hang on. That's not good. Hang on. Let me fix that. So we want just this coming in there right now. All right. Interesting. All right. Let me pause here for a second. Let me fix this and then I'll come right back. Hang on. All right. Let's try this again. All right. All right. Switch it back over. All right. So what I did here is I'm going to run it directly out of the channel instead of the routing folder. That's something I'll figure out later, not really worry about it. All right. But all I did was just move the send to the track directly. All right. That's all that changed. Okay. Now on this, you will see my reverb. Okay. Here's my track. All right. Here's my actual vocal track. It's this one right here with all the cuts and everything in it. All right. And what I am doing is I am sending that track through this send. All right. Right there. Here's my level. Make sure it's the 0. And that is being sent to this reverb over here. And now, let's see. I want to make sure I'm sharing audio so that you can actually hear this. Okay. Oh, I can do side by side. Let's try this. See if you see now. Now you should be able to see me and the window. That may make it too small. I like the other way better. Hang on. Here we go. Let's go here. There we go. Okay. We'll stick with this one. Yeah. And so now you will see that this level coming in through here. And hopefully you're hearing that now. Okay. And you can see, here's my track, okay, which it is still coming through my routing folder. But here's my track going through my send, which is over here. And this is what's actually happening. So yeah, like I say, here's my track going through my send over here into my reverb, which is right here. Now, you may ask yourself, why would you do this? Okay. We do this because certain plugins, okay, and this process the same. You would do this exact same thing. Hopefully you may have to, rewind a little bit and see and go through this step by step, but you'll make plenty of sends and we'll go over it through class and, if you still have questions. But why would we do this? Certain plugins are just CPU hogs. All right. They will bog down your computer. They will crash your session. And one of the main ones, one of the worst ones is reverb. Okay. And we use reverb all the time. So it is better to send a bunch of tracks, right? Like all of these vocals. I would send all of these vocals, put a send on every one of the tracks, send it to that one reverb. Okay. And that would save my CPU a lot of work. All right. It'll protect my session, keep me from, crashing and losing it, anything like that. All right. Let me just show you real quick how to do that. So you've already seen that I have one being sent here. Okay. Right here on this track. There's my send on that track. All right. Now, this is an old one. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. Same way with this. All right. Those are gone. They're not even in the session anymore. So different track. What I would do here for send, bus, vocals. And now this and this, both of these tracks are all coming over here to this reverb. I still only have one reverb, but now I have multiple tracks using that reverb. So it is not bogging down my CPU anymore because it's still only one reverb. That's the way this works, okay? Now you can do a shortcut for this is Option, and you can drag. See that? And you can just carry that from send to send. And now all of these vocals are going to this one send. This is such a, you know, it really, really will save your session. It'll save your computer. This is how you want to do it, okay? It's a little complicated, I understand, but like I say, it's something you need to learn how to do, and we can clean it up in class if you have any questions, all right? So now, next, let's actually talk about number 5 on the list. So far, number 1, we have balance and panning. Number 2, gain staging, okay? Number 3 is clip gain versus volume automation versus trim, okay? Number 4, what we just did, is creating stereo aux tracks, all right? Those are the 4 steps so far to day 2, your mixing, all right? Now, number 5 is you want to get rid of any dead air, all right? You want to get rid of dead air, and you want to start thinking about fades, all right? And so let me guide you through that and show you what's going on, all right? Now, you may ask, what is dead air, and why do we go through this process, okay? Our computer, you know, and one of the biggest concerns we have is the computer, all right? And so we have to deal with what's called CPU, all right? You know, our processing speed, all right? And what's happening is our computer has to play back silence. It's still using, you know, CPU to play back silence, all right? And even though we don't hear anything, it is still bogging down the processing power, all right? And so we can very, very quickly edit out any dead air. And what we can do is when we do that, we add a tight fade right before the wavelength, you know, the clip comes back or ends. We add it on both ends, okay? All right? And when you're doing this, it gets easier, it gets faster, and it starts to become part of your signature mixing, all right? And you may need at first to actually listen to every instrument, every clip, and take your time and carefully edit what you're doing, all right? You don't want to miss like a breath here or a breath there or somebody talking or coughing in the background, all right? Things like that. You want to make sure that your audio is as clean as possible without any pops and clicks, all right? And 2 things that we use for this. One is called strip silence, and the other one's called batch fades, all right? So let me show you those. Okay, so going back over here, we're going to this screen for now, all right? Let me open up some stuff here so we can see what's happening. Let's look at what's happening in the keys. Bass, nope, bass is playing all the time, makes sense. Electric guitar. Well, maybe vocals may be the best one. All right, so let's look at the vocals. So if I go in here, all right, and so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can see that there's some blank space, some dead air here, some dead air here, okay? Couple little blank spaces in between, all right? Not much, but we're going to look at this one. So the first thing we want to look for is strip silence. It's right here under edit, down here. See that? And so if you click on this, it'll now start to look at my clip. And did you see all these little lines start to come in? All right. And what it's doing, it's actually looking for all the silent parts in that on that track. Okay. And you'll get a little window that looks like this. See that? And you can start to mess with these faders to adjust how much it actually gets rid of and deletes. All right. And so that threshold is pretty high. I'm going to go that high just to show you what's happening. All right. And so I'm going to go in here. You will see we're going to hit extract. Yeah. See that? That is our silence that it's going to get rid of. I just want to show you that. You don't actually want to do that. So Command Z. I just wanted to show you that. So we're going to hit separate. And now what it's going to do, it turns all of my little silent pieces into separate clips that now I can strip or delete. Look at that. So now all that I'm left with is just the actual parts of audio. All of my silence is gone. That's the way this works. And now that cuts down on my CPU of my computer. All right. Now, next step, you would go through here, and this is pretty simple. Hopefully that made sense. Yeah. Now, with all of this highlighted, I would actually do what's called a batch fade, and that is Command F. And what you're going to get is this screen. All right. Now, batch fading is fine. It's not the best. It's kind of generic. All right. It's like eating a Big Mac. You know, everywhere you go, you're going to get the same thing, or, you know, a really, you know, poorly made, overpriced hamburger. Right. It's a Big Mac. Everybody knows what you're dealing with. Okay. Whereas you could do these one at a time by hand, maybe get a better effect. You can play around with some of the different types of fades, but you don't need to worry about that right now. Okay. This is just mainly, you're just getting introduced to some of these concepts. All right. So batch fade is fine. All right. Command F. All right. Now, all I do, everything's highlighted. I'm going to hit OK. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in on it and show it to you, is it draws in the fades for me. Do you see that? So it went through all of my clips, and wherever I made that strip silence, it drew in a fade for me. Do you see that? That's what it did. Now, like I say, you can do this in such a way to make it unique. You can actually like play around with these strips, these types of fades, but we're not going to worry too much about that right now. Batch fade is fine. All right. So this is how you would get rid of some of that dead air and just clean up and add your fades. Make sure you add fades, because if you don't add fades, that's going to make, you're going to get a bunch of pops and clicks. All right. So you don't want that. So make sure you add the fades. Now for me, I don't want any of this. Okay. So I'm going to Command Z all the way back out to where we started. This is before our strip silence, but that's what this is for. Okay. All right. I'm going to use this session in another class to demonstrate vocal comps. So I don't want to cut that thing up yet. All right. Now, next on our list, number 6, is consolidating. All right. Consolidating. Now, consolidating, when you're doing this, main thing when it comes to consolidating is you do it if you're sharing your sessions. All right. I think I showed you this real quickly in class the other day. When you use strip silence, you start to get all these cuts like this in your tracks. All right. And so that's fine and dandy if it's your track and you're working on the same session all the time. All right. But if you're working with somebody else and you send them your audio files, okay, that's not good, because all of those are just going to squish together and go to the beginning of your track and everything's going to be off. You don't want to do that. All right. So you need to consolidate your tracks, especially if you're sharing them with other people. All right. And I want to show you how to do this. I think I mentioned it, but I don't know if I actually showed you how to do it. So let me do this. Now, when you're consolidating, all right, and let's go up here and grab a different track. I don't want to mess with my vocals too much. Let's just do this right here. All right. This is a piano track. And you can see I have a couple cuts in it. All right. See that, and some blank space. All right. And it does not go all the way back to the beginning of my session. All right. That's the main thing I'm looking for. Doesn't really matter where it ends. It's where it starts that's the problem. That's what you have to concern yourself with. Okay. So if I have this piano part right here, I want to fill in all of this gap before I send it to somebody. Now, whenever you're doing this, I always recommend creating a duplicate playlist first of your track. That way you don't want to like cut up or mess up your original audio. And the way you do that is right here. You see this little arrow, okay? And you'll see duplicate main playlist, all right? And now what it'll do is it'll just watch my name change. Did you see that? Did you see this go to a 2? All right. And now if I click on this, here's my original. There's my duplicate I just made. All right. Okay. We're going to deal with this duplicate. Now, what you do is you take this and you go all the way back to the beginning of the track. All right. You see how everything is highlighted all the way back to the beginning of the track. That's what I want. Now I'm going to go up here, and it should be under Edit, Consolidate Clip. You see that? And now what this is going to do when I hit this, it's going to take my audio file, it's going to leave it where it is, and it's going to fill in all the gap. Just like that. See that? Now, when I send it to somebody, that when they import it into their session, and remember, copy all right? Not just add, copy all, yep. That's all it's gonna line up exactly where I want it to be in my session. If I didn't do that, it would all scrunch back to 0. But that's how you consolidate your tracks. And when you do this, you're gonna want to do this for every track in your session. And you can select multiple. You can select the whole thing and do this at one time, all right? But this is how you do it, all right? Yeah, so far so good. Now, this is roughly those 6 steps, all right? Those are the like rough, basic intro to mixing things that you have to do, all right? Now, on top of this, I would add 2 more steps, all right? And these are suggestions, but they're very strong suggestions, all right? Number 7, or number 1 on the suggestion list, if you want to think about it like that, is I would recommend making a mix log. All right. And especially if you're not the most organized person, yeah, make a mix log. All right. And you might want to do, create a little template. All right. Using this type of checklist, what we've talked about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. Like make a checklist. Have I gone through and I've done all the balancing? Check. Have I actually separated and panned my tracks? Or are they all still right at the center in mono? Yeah. Have you started to actually put things over here that complement things over here? Yeah. Okay. Check. All right. Move on. Have I created, this? Did I create my reverb stereo sends? Check. Are they working? Double check, right? That type of idea. So go through these, did you consolidate? Check, right? You can use this mix log, this little template, this checklist I'm giving you as your template, all right? And all of this, and I recommend writing your days and then maybe how much time you actually spent working on your sessions, all right? And that'll show you, be like, oh, well, this sounds bad. Well, how much time did you actually work on it? 17 minutes. Well, then maybe that may show you. That may tell you something right there, right? So a timeline may help you, okay? But this concept of a mix log, it will evolve and it should be based really on session by session. You won't get the same thing over and over and over, but you might have like a master list of steps. but each session is going to give you a little bit of a different form as you work on different things. All right. If you're dealing with more tracks, it may take more time for you to balance. All right. Type of idea. You get what I'm talking about, right? So that's going to kind of evolve based on your session. Next, number 8 on the list, number 2 on your suggestion. This is one of those like strong suggestions, and it's about saving your work. All right. We've talked a lot about how to save your work, how to name your work, where to save your work, right? So another big thing is that when you save, you actually want to normal your session. What does that mean? What does normal your session? Okay. That means that when you look at a session, there's a few things you want to see. Let me show you. Let me switch over and let me normal this session. Okay. So if you see this, all right, it's kind of all over the place. I'm seeing some of my tracks, some of this and that, you know. Say, for example, my cursor is halfway in measure 25. All right. This is not normal. This is not good. All right. You want to normal your sessions at the end of every day before your final save. All right. So step 1, hit return, send your cursor back to the beginning. That's always a biggie. Next one, option A. Okay. And now that's going to bring all of my session into screen. All right. Now, for me, because I have routing folders, I will even go on and close these routing folders. All right. Like that. And I don't have a master fader. So let's go ahead and add a master fader, because I told you, you should always have a master fader, right? So I'm going to add a stereo master fader at the bottom of my track. I'm going to rename, because master 1 doesn't make sense to me, because I'm not going to have a master 2. So now there are my tracks. Now I'm going to hit return, take it back to the beginning. You see my cursor up here is at 1. Okay. I'm going to hit command or option A. See that way I see all of my track. Now the next one I'm going to hit is control option command, hold all 3 down, and a down arrow. And now that actually fills up my screen going this way. All right. Option A goes this way, fills it up this way, and then control option command down arrow fills it this way. Okay. So now I have my full screen, everything I'm working with, and my cursor is at 0. All right. Or 1, measure 1. All right. Beginning of the screen. Now that is normaled. This is what you want. You want to see the entire session. And every time somebody or yourself opens it up day to day, you press the space bar and you go. All right. This is what you want to do. You want to normal your session at the end of every day. All right. And then command S, save a lot, save and save. Yeah. So there we go. That's day 2 of mixing. All right. So that kind of finishes my concept of organizational steps. All right. Now, we're not finished, but that was just finishing up what I started the other day in class. All right. Next thing I want to talk about is some editing basics. All right. We're not going to get too involved when it comes to editing, but I do want to go over a lot of editing fundamentals. Okay. You're going to need this. And let's just start. Okay. When you look at Pro Tools, all right, Pro Tools has 2 main workspaces. All right. We have the edit window. All right. And we have the mix window. All right. Your edit window, that's your main screen. All right. That's this one. All right. There's your edit window. Now your mix window, that's the one that looks like a mixing board. That's this one. All right. That's your mix window. And your shortcut to get between the two is command equal. Okay. All right. Now, this one, your edit window, what it shows is a timeline-based view of your tracks, your regions, what we call clips, all right, any automation and any MIDI if you had it in your tracks, all right, in your session. This is where you would see it. Now, we use this screen for your editing. That's why it's called an edit window, right? But you can also use it for like any arranging, any comping, which I'm going to show you comping here in a minute. And like I say, any automation if you wanted to write it in, all right? And a few things that are on here that you really got to watch for are your rulers, which I'm going to go over here in just a minute, all right? Up here, these are your rulers, these things, okay? This is where you see like your bars, your beats, your minutes, etc. All right. Now you will also see all of your tracks, and these are vertically aligned. Okay. All right. And if it's open, you will see your clip view, your automation lane, and your playlist view. Okay. Like clip list and things like that. It's all over here. All right. All of that would be seen on this screen if it's open. All right. Now, when you go to your mix window, this one, okay, what does it show? It is a mixer style layout, okay? And if I have my routing folders open, you see that it becomes a much bigger window. There's a lot more going on, all right? Yeah. And so you see this mixer style layout with volume faders, inserts, sends, IO, all right, panning, all right, solo mute buttons, input mode, record mode. There's a lot of information on here. Comments down at the bottom where you know what type of mic did we use, all this stuff, all right. There's a lot on, and it's configurable, all right. If you go in here, you see this mix window view, you can actually determine what you see on this screen. It's all right there. Me personally, I like EQ curves on there as well. There are no EQ plugins, so there's nothing showing up. But if I did have EQs on that, it would show up right here. All right. That way I don't have to open up my plugins. I like that. All right. But what do we use this for? All right. This is our screen that really controls our mix levels, our balancing, everything we talked about today. All right. Your plugins and your controls. All right. And your routing, sending things to your sends and all that. Okay. This is really what this is for. Okay. Now, in Pro Tools, it offers 7 main editing tools. So let's go back to this screen and let's talk about some of these editing tools. All this stuff up here in our transport bar. All right. And we're going to start right over here. We're going to start with this one. The first one, our zoom tool. All right. What does this do? We can click it and it lets us zoom in on our timeline. See that? It actually shows us different things and it'll zoom in. All right. There are shortcuts for all of these, but unless you're using like function keys, we're not going to worry about it. All right. For now, just go up here and click on the actual button itself and you'll be perfectly fine. All right. All right. Next one is your trim tool. This one. All right. And you'll see there's a couple little things underneath, sub menus. We're not going to worry about that. So the trim tool looks like a staple. Do you see that? And now what does this do? This actually grabs the edge of my clip and I can move it around. That's what the trim tool does. Okay. Yeah. Trim tool. And I can go, you'll see it change directions. It all depends on like where I need to go with that track. See that? See it? Okay. Trim tool. Next is selector. That's the next one. What do you think selector does? It selects things. All right. So if we want to hit something and we wanted that highlighted, we would use our selector tool. There it is. See that? This now will highlight different sections of our clips to allow us for our editing. That's all it means. All right. That's what we're working on. Boom, boom, boom. All right. Just like that. Next one is our grabber tool. All right. Looks like a hand. All right. This is how you move stuff around. That's what that does. That's what the grabber does. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Grabber. All right. Next is a scrubber. That's this one that looks like a little speaker. All right. And what this does, we can actually have it play particular parts on particular tracks. We can go forward, we can go backwards. This helps us find problems like clips, pops, things like that. Okay. Uh, this is how we find exact edit points. Okay. And it's our scrubber. It looks like a little speaker. And we just click and drag. And if you do one track at a time, right, you can clip here. Yeah. Or if you're in the middle, you can do 2 tracks. All right. If you let it like span 2, you can get 2 tracks or just 1 at a time. Okay. Little thing there. All right. Next, pencil tool. All right. This is how you draw in your automation, or if you're editing your MIDI. I don't have any MIDI in this section, but if I did, I could use my pencil to actually draw in MIDI notes on my MIDI editor. Okay. This is what this would do. Now, let me show you a little bit about automation. Okay. I'm just going to draw it in really quick because I don't want you to use it yet. So I'm going to switch, and you'll see down here underneath my track name, you'll see a little thing that says waveform. Okay, this is your track view selector. You can click on it, and now all of these things on here, this is showing me what is actually like able to be automated on this track. All right. So if I hit volume, I will now get an automation lane. That's what this is called. Okay. And you'll see that with my pencil, I can now draw on this automation lane. Yeah. So let's go back. And what I'm going to do is right here, I'm going to play this, solo this out, and I want you to watch what happens here. Watch my fader, because that's what's controlling my audio, right? See how it's moving on me? That's that automation that I just drew in. It's really slow, but there it goes. See it getting louder again? Stagnant. All right, now it's going to drop down. Watch it go down. There we go. Yeah, so that's how you would do that. Now, a good thing about all this is that it is completely deletable and non-destructive. Okay. And the way you do that is right there, but I'm going to go back to the waveforms. That's what we use the pencil for. Okay. Now, the last one of these editors is called a smart tool. Now, you saw that I could have the trimmer, okay, or my grabber. All these, I can do these separately, okay? Or if you look real closely, there's a bar over all 3 of those. If I click on that bar, that gives me now control over all 3 of these as what's called my smart tool, all right? And this is like a context sensitive combo tool, all right? This is what we use. This is our standard setting, all 3 of those. This is what we use the most for